much for joining. I'm just gonna do this video in English because I really need to practice um, the lecturers, all the information that might be assessed in the final exam. So uh, we are ending our first semester. Well, myself. Um, so I'm just like gonna try to wait, all messages. Okay, so I'm doing this video just for practice study purposes, and I'm gonna start with this subject, which is environment and disasters. So pretty much what I have here are one lecture about GIS. Then I start a second lecture just right here, which is Sociology of Disasters. And it goes this way until this way, the other page. And then I have like this spatial planning and public health and disasters, which is another lecture from this other professor. And then I have it until here. It will cover this page, and also in the back. Imagine I wrote all of this just for you to practice, okay? So pay attention to me. And I'm sorry because I'm not fluent in English, so it's gonna be really messy. Then we have another lecturer, which is socioeconomics of disaster risk management and climate adaptation and economic instruments. This one was really tough. Then we have a sphere. So about the sphere, this is another lecturer that we have, and then urban and environmental health. And then we have the last, which is about geological and environmental risks that generate emergencies and catastrophes. So pretty much we have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven lecturers right here. Imagine all the information that we have, all the content. I just tried to put it into one single page, but it was obvious it's not possible because of all the information. So imagine each lecturer lasted like three days in a three ish, like 3 hours ish setting, like period of time, that it was like 3 hours for each day would be like 6 hours, 7 hours a day. No, wait, it will be like 10 hours a day. Like imagine 10 hours of a study of this specific lecture, and then it goes to three more 10 hours just for this, 10 hours for this. So it's like a lot of study. So we have weeks of study um, in those pages. So imagine just in this, I have 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days. So it's gonna be really like a bunch of information. So for now, I'm really confused. I'm just gonna try to do my best because I'm just gonna read, and that's how I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna study doing this in this way. I'm sorry again because I have to do it in English, and my audience here in YouTube is most Spanish speakers, so I'm really sorry, but I'm just doing this to study and to memorize and try to practice. So I think like this is gonna be like for 1 hour long. I'm gonna just try to read, so I'm just not gonna try to explain because it will take a lot of time. So we have like this subject, environment and disasters, which was a very important, interesting, surprising, shocking uh, lecture, like a bunch of lectures, because it has like a series of lectures. So I'm just gonna start with GIS. I remember that Professor Fernando was the lecturer in charge of this lecturer. So we studied about the GIS. Basically, GIS is Geographic Information Systems. It is a tool that helps to get geospatial data it has some aims, like locate affected areas, like through mapping, because the GIS is gonna give us the software to create some maps in order to locate affected areas or potential areas that are under risk of a disaster. It will help us through the mapping identify vulnerable people, try to, through the mapping, do evacuation planning, try to create a map so we can distribute the humanitarian aid through the mapping and through the areas that are needed, and then create a map so we can allocate resources in terms of medical response. And also this GIS will help us to respond in a very rapid manner in terms of disasters. So we have like QGIS. It's a quantum, and it is a quantum, which is a software. So basically it combines GIS, but we have Q because it's the most popular software. It is a open source tool software, and it has like a lot of it provides like a tool for people, like they are researchers, urban planners, environmental scientists, and its aim is like map creation, spatial analysis, data visualization, decision making. And when it comes to use those softwares, we have to remember that there is a procedure in the way that we are going to create the folder. First, we have to make sure that all the data that we collect, it's gonna be in this format, .shp. Then we create the first folder, which is QGIS project. Then there is two other main folders. The first is database, and the second folder is gonna be cartobase. The database, it includes all the raw processed information. It will include geospatial data sets. But when it comes to cartobase, we will find cartographic resources. Then we have the database, which is a collection of geographic and attribute data. Disaster, I don't know what the professor wanted us to know the disaster definition, because it's mixing up GIS with disaster. So I guess like disaster, he wanted us to make sure that we remember the definition of disaster. So we have like disruption. What is a disaster? Well, disaster is a disruption of the functions in a community or society, and it will damage or will cause widespread losses, damages in the human losses. Like in a society, you will die because of the strike of the disaster. Like material losses, like assets will be lost, economic losses, which is part of the material losses, environmental losses, because a lot of animals will be dying, like squirrels and these kind of animals, but whatever. Then another definition is base map. Cartographic base foundational layer of geographic information provides context over other thematic data can be displaced. Oh, displayed, because I'm sorry, my stupid English is not good, but you know, maybe my letter is not clear enough, but you can clearly read is displayed. Raster data, it is the raster data. We are talking about pixels, continuous data such as elevation. It's better to use it with elevation. Then we have vector data, which are represented using points, lines, polygons, and specific objects. And then we have map projections, which is we completed all these using GIS, QGIS, and we completed the map. So at the end, the map projection is the final step. I'm sorry, no, it's not. Map composition is the final step. Map projection is a bunch of methods that will represent the curved surface of Earth on a flat map. And the map composition is the final stage of map creation. All the elements aim make the map clear and useful. So Elements of a map are title, legend, scale, compass, grid and coordinate, source and date. So that's the basic components that a map should contain when we put some maps into our research documents or our documents that we are going to present to the government or to the NGOs or to the stakeholders or to the donors. So they always want to know what are the areas that are being affected by a disaster. So we use this kind of mapping tools, the GIS, mostly the QGIS, because as I mentioned is the most popular. Then we have like the sociology of disasters, which is a different lecture. And this was given by Professor Helal. So remember the name because Professor Fernando was the one in charge of GIS, and Professor Helal mostly was giving us the lecture about sociology of disasters, a very important lecture that it called my attention because it's related to social sciences. And as you know, like I'm a lawyer studying public health in disaster, which is very uncommon because I'm a lawyer. So I don't fit in this master, but I don't know why or how I ended up in this master. However, I got the scholarship, and then, well, I'm just trying to understand all of this because we have the assessment soon. So thank you very much, guys, you that are joining this kind of study or whatever it is. It's just like I'm just trying to study all the lecturers. We finished just one, which is this. Now we're gonna switch to the sociology of disaster. So we have to understand that natural disaster are acts of social injustice. Natural hazard is the condition of the built environment. The oh God, the sociologists are professionals that study root causes and social consequences of natural disasters, natural hazards, and disasters. And then a disaster is a social phenomena that affects a society or communities. The society and communities will incur into damages, losses, disruption, routine functioning. It's pretty much this idea. It's similar to disaster that we have here in the first lecture, which is a disruption of functions in a community, society, and it will lead to human losses, material losses, economic losses, environmental losses. So then we have a timeline when sociology of disaster started. We have like here disaster sociology. We have a first question: are the disaster what is the question about disasters like in the sociology environment? And they said like a disaster is a social psychologically in nature, something like that. I didn't pay attention to his class. So and then we have like the sociology of disaster was introduced by the US military during wartime around 1940, 1950. Then Sweden was a pioneer that also tried to collaborate in enhancing like sociology of disaster. So Sweden jumped into the sociology of disaster research in 1970, and we have this person Enrico Quarantelli, which is considered the founder of sociology of disaster. Then sociology of disaster is a response to how environmental extremes shape society. And in 21st century, this sociology of disaster is ongoing, evolving field. So we are expecting like this sociology of disaster is gonna like continue growing, continue being developed through the coming years. And then we have a second question right here, as you can see. And the question that sociologists ask is how human behavior reacts in collective stress. Some research suggests that the human behavior in disasters, there is self-control, or disaster myths. When it comes to self-control, like people wants to have the control, and then disaster myths, it's involving infodemics, and also we have some other like behaviors, like people will behave altruistic, organ problem solving. They will like to try to solve the problem. There is evidence that people will behave in three different ways, like the first, convergence behavior, second, panic and pro-social, and number three behavior is crime and conflict. So we have evidence that when there is a disaster, people will massive displace, or they will mobilize to the epicenter to help, which is very important because I didn't know that people, when it comes to a disaster, people are influenced by humanitarian spirits and they want to help. And I remember that one professor was mentioning like there was a tsunami happening in Asia, and then in the United States they were like missionaries of Kentucky and they came to rescue the population in need. So I will say that the missionaries of Kentucky in some way or another they were influenced by the convergence behavior because they wanted to go to mobilize to the epicenter of the tsunami in order to help. Of course, when it comes to convergence behavior, we can find like some categories like humanitarian volunteers, we have the journalists, we have researchers, we also have the police, we have also the first aid responders, which are emergency, the rescuers. So, and also we have some volunteers or people that just want to help. Then I understood that there is also the second human behavior in collective stress. Some some researchers mention that in a disaster, panic, it's one of the behaviors, but it is a misconception because it is evidence-based that most of the people will act in a pro-social way, which is altruistic. Pro-social behavior is primary response to catastrophes, which people will try to help, will try to donate money, will try to give resources in order to face the needs of the people that was affected by the disaster. Then we have the crime and conflict. This is also something important to note because people mentions that during disaster, crime and conflict will be severe. However, that's a lie, that's a myth, because when it comes to disaster, it is important to know the context, like because if we know that there is conflict in a disaster zone, it's because of the past context of the country, not necessarily the conflict was created by the disaster, but because the society is a very conflictive, either by cultural aspects or because they are in political conflict. So it also combines crime and conflict. So disaster, normally in disaster we don't find crime and conflict unless the country has these endemic situations. Then we have like let me see. Question 3, disaster social order. Disaster risk reflect pre-existing social and economic inequalities. People in margin, people in vulnerable, people in vulnerable people, suffer more physical and mental health and that leads to protracted recovery process, which means like people that it's poor, I'm just gonna write it because I know low income people, let me see, I don't know if it's possible, but low income people in a sad phase because they are poor people evidence that poor people, low income families will suffer more physical and mental health, leading to protracted recovery processes. Imagine that. So poor people will be exposed to more physical and mental health diseases due to the disaster, which is really bad. And then we have convergence research framework. It's the knowledge production. It takes multidisciplinary approach, problem focused, solutions oriented, focus on disaster justice. To prevent this happening, there is a convergence research framework, which is a multidisciplinary approach. It includes specialists to prevent this happen. Like, because people in need normally is low income people or poor people. So we jump from this lecture to the second part of the lecture. Oops, what's that? So let me see. I'm just gonna try to explain. Well, so now we jumped here and we have disaster sociology, ever evolving field. So if you are interested in doing research in sociology of disaster, there is a vast, like it's an open door for many, topics to explore research and provide solutions from the sociology settings. Then again, we have like 3 times already like disaster definition. So we have it here one. This is one. Look at this. There is disaster definition here. Then we have it again. Let me see where we have it. Oh, we have it here. So this is the number two definition of disaster. Now we have it a key here. It is repeated again, like disruption, social system, disrupts social dynamics, collapse of social structural arrangements. A disaster will produce social inequality, and social inequality are the root causes. According to United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, a disaster is, okay, so we have it again here. So we have it number 2, 3, and then 4 times that we have the definition. So it seems to me that at this point I have to memorize disaster definition because it's mentioned at least 4 times, and through all these other pages we're gonna see that it's going to be repeated even more times. So we have to understand the definition of a disaster. So according to the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, we have that disaster is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community society due to hazard, those events interacting with exposure, vulnerability, capacity, leading to human, material, economic, environmental losses and impacts. So we have the risk is equal to hazard times exposure times vulnerability. If a country has high hazard exposure, well, that's bad. If the exposure is high and the vulnerability is high, we're gonna have a disaster. Okay, so disaster. Those are the components of a disaster. If the risk is like real, then we have a disaster because of those components, you see? So then the vulnerability are conditions that determine susceptibility to natural hazards, impacts, and the capacity for coping and recovery of a community evolves through root causes. Those causes could be dynamic pressures, unsafe conditions, sometimes political failures, and the drivers: hazardness of place, built environment. Social vulnerability is the interaction between the hazard and vulnerability conditions that will produce social injustice. Components of social vulnerability, we have social structure and capital vulnerability, physical vulnerability, economic vulnerability, attitudinal, motivational vulnerability, and those vulnerabilities can be assessed in some way through those tools. We have measuring social vulnerability through SOBI, SBI, DOI, which are assessments to measure social vulnerability. Then we have social components of risk prevention and resilience. Okay, the social components of risk prevention and resilience. So resilience is community-centered approach to build resilience against social vulnerabilities. And then we have community in all, this resilience must be applied in disaster management cycle. The community can be defined as a linked to location or relationships linked to exposure and vulnerability. The community has four important components or elements, like number one is having members, number two, able to influence, number three, integration and fulfillment of needs, number four, share emotional connections. Then community, we have this other tool, which is an approach, the CBDRM approach, which is community-based disaster risk management. This approach helps to build resilience because we will see that this is very important because it's a local level. So the idea is to create leadership, empowerment, ownership for the communities, so the communities are prepared to face the disaster cycle. Then we have the grassroots approach, so which is CBDRM, is a grassroots approach. Communities are a very important element to understand the complexity of vulnerability, which vulnerability could be reduced or could be created due to the community approach. So the vulnerability is something important which is linked to the community. With this approach, the CBDRM approach, we are trying to increase the local knowledge and culture, mixing up with a little bit of scientific knowledge and research. So the CBDRM, at the end, it is a participatory process, culture and context specific. The community is actively engaged to identify the assets, the threats, the plan for hazards, and the vulnerabilities that could be reduced by implementing the CBDRM. The center of research process value local knowledge. So this is also important. There are some characteristics to the CBDRM. The aims of the CBDRM are number one, community empowerment and ownership. Number two, enhance skills and capacity for resilience, which leads to builds people coping capacity, which is prevention and being proactive in terms of being prepared for in case of a risk, hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, which is a disaster. So we have like UNDP suggested enhancements on this approach, which are DRMZ, local committee, resource mapping, DRM plan, DRM and community learning systems, simulations, early warning systems that we have it here. So the CBDRM process is a progressive improvements in public safety and community resilience. Multiple stakeholders can participate in the community-based disaster risk management. It combines insiders, which is the community, but also outsiders that could be researchers, NGOs, stakeholders, other institutions, and whatever. So we have the steps for the CBDRM. Number one, selecting the community through a survey. Number two, rapport building, understanding the situation and creating trust and confidence with the population in need. Then we have the PDRA, which is a participatory DR assessment Number 4, we have the community-based participatory disaster risk management planning, and we have the building, training, disaster risk management committee, which are in charge of like the local committee, community manage implementation, and then the final and more important steps, it will be like the number 7 here, monitoring and evaluation, which is very important. Once we implement the community-based disaster risk management, we have some research approaches. The PAR, Participatory Action Research, the RPA, Rapid Rural Appraisal, the PRA is the Participatory Rural Appraisal. The PAR is Research, Action, Empowerment. This is community-centered. The Rapid Rural Appraisal is for outsiders because they will need to collect the information, analyze the information, and then present a plan to the community. Then we have like community participatory rural appraisal, community analysis and plan, own solutions. It's a mix between outsiders, the community authorities, and the outsiders will be facilitators and coordinators. Oof. As you can see, there is a lot of information. So here now we have like to implement the community-based disaster risk management, we have to have resources, right? So when it comes to implementing CBDRM, we have to get social capital and collective action, social interventions, because at the end, with money, we will have social interventions. When it comes to the social capital, we have to have a distinction between the individual levels and the collective levels. There is the individual level, which is a individual capital for individuals through social networks, network-based social capital. Then we have like collective level for a community or group, civic capital. The social capital is resources available for use by individuals to reach their goals. Features of social organization includes networks, norms, trust that will lead to facilitate action and cooperation for mutual benefit. We have cognitive social capital and the structural social capital. When we talk about social capital in disaster resilience, we are talking about improving preparedness, mutual aid, psychological support. When the disaster affects social capital, there would be inequalities, lost community structures, social tensions. How to build resilience in communities? That is a good question. But first, we need to know what is resilience. So let me, because I need to rest, like resilience, bending, rebounding, restoring is the opposite to vulnerability. Resilience is a component of reliability. So the definition basically is ability of a system, community or society exposed to hazard to resist, absorb, accommodate, adapt to, transform, and recover from the effects of a hazard in a timely and efficient manner, including through the preservation and restoration of its essential basic structures and functions through risk management. Individual resilience is individual coping capacities, which is also considered as a self-efficacy approach. The organizational resilience is high reliability organizations, good detecting danger, internal or external disturbances, and responding to lessen the danger. Components, improvisation, virtual role systems, wisdom, respectful interaction. Community resilience is the interplay of multiple social systems that compose the cultural elements of the community, which is governance. They share risk and act collectively. The elements of community resilience are human capital. This can be individual or community, I guess. Economic capital, social capital, improvisation, physical infrastructural resources, community capital, natural resources, institutional capital, and political capital. Then we have the capacity to measure the resilience of one community through the MCEER resilience framework. Resilience qualifies robustness, redundancy, rapidity, resourcefulness. Resourcefulness. Drop model, we can use those tools because those are tools to measure the resilience in a community. The drop model measures community resilience and vulnerability, disaster resilience of place. The brick measures community resilience, which is baseline resilience indicators for communities. CRSA, it will measure the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Community resilience self-assessment. And we have the RAF. It will assess social, what is C? I don't know, I forgot now. Social capacity, maybe? I don't know, maybe yes. Resilience action framework. And the Copwell framework will measure community resilience. And that's it. We finished the second lecture. We started here with this first lecturer, then we moved to this sociology of disaster, and we explored this, we finished this, and then we jump into this other page. Look at this. It's a lot of information. So far we cover 1, 2, 3 pages. And we have this, which is another lecturer. I think like I'm just gonna finish this, and then in the afternoon I'm going to move to this, and this. And we will be finishing the environment and disasters subject, which includes 7 different topics, 7 different lecturers. And as you can see, we started with GIS, the Geographic Information Systems, then Sociology of Disasters, and now we're gonna talk about spatial planning and public health in disasters. All this information has to be with Sendai framework, which is a document from the United Nations that will help us to, that will provide us some guidelines, key principles in order to understanding disaster risk management. So it's very important. Now, okay, I'm just gonna grab the chair because I don't know if it's the video or my phone. What happened? Christian, Jesus, what happened? Like you're asking me, but tell me what's wrong. Okay, whatever. So we have this spatial planning and public health in disaster. Spatial planning states responsibility in the use of territory in a selected and organized manner through territorial planning when applied to cities. It's called urbanism. Key concepts: land use, zoning, rural development. Those are concepts into spatial planning. Spatial planning is a policy because the authorities, the local authorities, the government authorities, they have the power and the decision of creating some policies, governmental strategies, and spatial planning is one of the governmental policies because it has to be created through the formal power, and it's also a technique when it is applied to cities, it is urbanism. So, what is the purpose of spatial planning? Is that it will help us establishing for each territory and at different scales a sustainable development framework that respects and reconciles all interests, ensuring a better future for new generations. So the idea of spatial planning is to organize the territory in an efficient way that respects all the interests that the community have. Understanding disaster risk requires evidence-based territorial planning. Understanding disaster risk in territorial planning, so we have to understand that it's very important because in disaster risk reduction, the territorial planning will help us to map risk zones, disaster-prone areas, hazard-prone areas, integrate public health data, use tools such as GIS, QGIS to analyze exposure of population and infrastructure. Then we have impact on public health. Knowing where the most vulnerable groups are located allows for better planning of the response and prevention of avoidable mortality. Planning is a public policy that saves lives when done with clear rules, responsibilities, and citizen participation. It is also an investment. Rebuilding leads to more justice and less risk. Building back better, which is a principle of Sendai framework. Then spatial planning is an instrument for implementing the Sendai framework. Spatial justice is the idea that territory is not neutral. Decisions about land use, location of services, and infrastructure can reproduce or correct social inequalities. In urban planning, social justice means ensuring that all social groups most vulnerable have equitable access to safe housing, green spaces, sustainable mobility, critical infrastructure such as health, schools, water, protection from natural hazards. If those, if if all those elements are not implemented, that means that it will be injustice, spatial injustice. Spatial injustice means territorial exclusion, segregation, neglect, or informal settlements, lack protection in risk areas, conflict, and crime. Spatial justice determines who suffers and who lives. When territory fails, health systems fail with it. A hospital that floods ceases to be a hospital, it becomes a warning sign. Preventive planning, resilience in public health. Well-planned cities reduce chronic diseases, improve emergency response, and promote equity. History of spatial planning. So we have like a bunch of history details here. It it was created in Mesopotamia, Industrial Revolution. Then we have like zoning mapping in 1990s, City of Vancouver, British Columbia, post-war era, in modern spatial planning, current trends and future. Active participation, but also in the future possible, like the AI will try to develop more spatial planning through AI. So spatial planning and CDGs, it is linked to the CDG 11, promote sustainable cities and communities. CDG 13 supports climate action. The CDG 15 protects life and land. Spatial planning and public health. So imagine this is just like that. And surprise, more information coming. Wow, look at this, more information for you guys to study if you wanna do it in this master. Like, oof. So far, I think I'm just gonna read this very, very fast, and then we're gonna stop right there because we have like more information coming in the afternoon. So this is the first session. Pay attention. I'm just studying. This is just for my personal purposes. I'm just studying because I have an assessment in January, And if I fail the assessments, that will mean like I'm not gonna be able to join the second semester. So imagine that this is very important for my career, for the continuity of my personal interest in the continuity of the master program in the public health in disasters. So I got the scholarship and now I'm studying this, but it's high demanding in terms of energy and efforts and discipline. Like you have to study a lot of things. Just this is just one subject, and then we have like a lot of other lecturers coming in another subject. So this is just one subject, and in this one subject we have a series of different lecturers with different topics, different professors, different opinions, experiences, and then I know that for your brain this is a lot of information. Imagine for my brain it's just like I'm just feeling stupid even more, like this is all in English. So imagine I have to have the capacity to understand all the definitions, the concepts, the principles, and the models, strategies, abbreviations, and whatever. So it's really important to know that. So I'm just gonna continue with this other. Let me read it again really fast because I have to do something like spatial planning and public health. City UN estimates that 50% world's population lives in urban areas. Health city aspects that have influence on human health, like water supply, drainage, and sanitation, plus public baths, plus urban planning, plus health facilities. Why does planning for health during disaster matter? Continuity of care depends on the location, accessibility, resilience of health infrastructure. Medieval city, classic city. The medieval city had some disadvantages, and then the classical city as well. And then we have a review of those cities, such as the hygiene, revealing the breakdown in the hygiene standards existed in the classical city, very precarious capillary public space and high urban density, lack of basic sanitation as well, epidemic outbreaks, facilities located outside the city. The Haussmannian renovation launched the hygienist urbanism. Modern movement number one, and then we have the modern movement number two, modern movement number three, which is the most important because we have laws. This law was approved, the general regulation for urban building, constructions, reconstructions, ensure ventilation, natural lighting, exposure, sun rays, supply of drinking water, harmless evacuation of sewage, and then in future cities will be created in a way that we interact only in 15 minutes. The cities in the future also are going to be more inclusive. Then we have like Kevin Lynch's proposal, the image of the city. A city should have 5 elements. Number 1, paths. Number 2, edges. Number 3, districts. Number 4, nodes. And number 5, landmarks. Framework as practical tool to understand how urban forms shape vulnerability and mobility during crisis. So we have paths. The paths are channels along which the observer customarily, occasionally, or potentially moves. Edges are linear breaks in continuity barriers, more or less penetrable, that can close one region off from another. Oh, I'm back, sorry. Something happened with my internet, but I'm back. So we have districts are the relatively large city which the observer can mentally go inside of, thematic continuities which may consist of an endless variety of components. Nodes are the strategic foci into which an observer can enter, maybe primarily junctions, places of a break in transportation, a crossing, or convergence of paths. And finally, we have landmarks, are point references considered to be external to the observer, more easily identifiable if they have a clear form, prominence of spatial location. Vulnerability assessment in spatial planning. We have physical dimension, social dimension, economic dimension, environmental dimension, institutional, attitudinal, or cultural. Physical, connect with built environment, urban planning, and building codes reduce physical vulnerability. Social, factors such as age, income, health, social networks, social cohesion, or the strength of community ties also affects resilience. Communities with strong social networks often respond more effectively to emergencies. Economic communities with limited financial resources may lack the ability to prepare for response to and recover from disasters. Environmental, natural, and human altered environments both affect vulnerability. Areas prone to hazards like flooding, landslides, or earthquakes are at a higher risk. Environmental degradation exacerbates the impact of natural hazards. Institutional vulnerabilities, the strength and responsiveness of local governance, emergency services hinder response and recovery efforts. Attitudinal, cultural vulnerabilities, perceptions, beliefs, and attitudes of individuals or groups towards risk. Communities that underestimate risk may not take necessarily precautions. Cultural factors also influence whether people evacuate or seek shelter, how they communicate, and how they cooperate with authorities. Planning for disaster mitigation, in this case, floods. Um we have types of floods, types of interventions that could we develop through urban planning. And then we have another example like the heat wave. Oh, Another example, the heat waves. The WMO states that a heat wave is when the daily maximum temperature for more than 5 consecutive days exceeds the average maximum temperature by 9 degrees. We also have another examples like earthquakes, landslides, wildfires, droughts, heat waves, man-made disaster in urban planning such as urban fires. Urban fires and also air contamination, water contamination. Urban planning is the effective mitigation to reduce disasters risk. We can do it through planning, plus regulation, plus education, plus green infrastructure. And that's how we finish our lecture number 3. Remember that we still have like 1, 2, 3, 4 lectures more coming in the afternoon. If this study, if this summary is of your best interest, please join me in the afternoon because I'm just gonna do the second part of this study. Remember that we are talking about environment and disasters here, environment and disasters, which is a bunch of series of different topics, different lecturers, different professors that explain different context experience and of course different theory, strategies, whatever. So that's the main idea. It is only for my personal study. I know that my English is so messy. I'm really sorry about that, but I'm just trying to explain whatever I had here. It's a lot of information. Oh, I hope to get a good score in my assessment because otherwise I will fail this semester and then I will be kicked out from this scholarship and I'm not gonna be able to find a job and then I'm gonna be living a miserable life here, a very disastrous life here in Europe, and we don't want that. So I'm just trying to study and cope the assessment with these kind of techniques. So I have implemented some good techniques on this, like you can see, notes taking, and then trying to read this and then try to explain in my own words. So I think like we have 3 different approaches, 3 different study techniques here. And on top of that, I know that my English is so bad, so I'm really, really sorry about it. But I hope you can, well, if you like the video, please at least give a like, okay? So I'm just gonna see you in the afternoon. I have to have a rest right now, okay? See you guys, bye.